the secrets Rob Porter knew, the war over cultural appropriation, and the Great Camel Slam. At least 17 people are dead and dozens more are wounded after a former student opened fire in a South Florida school. Terrified students at Marjorie Stoneman Douglas High School sheltered in place. And some posted videos online as police and SWAT teams worked to lock down the building. Authorities say they found the suspect in a neighboring town nearly 2 hours after the shooting happened.
He is in custody, and we've already began to dissect his websites and the things that social media that he was on, and some of the things that have come to mind are very, very disturbing.
President Trump tweeted out that his prayers and condolences are with the victims. South African President Jacob Zuma has resigned, finally. In a televised address to the nation, Zuma said he didn't want to divide his party, the African National Congress.
I have therefore come to the decision to resign as President of the Republic with immediate effect.
But just hours before, Zuma had scoffed at calls from party officials for him to step down over corruption allegations. That had forced the ANC to plan a no-confidence vote in Parliament tomorrow. Cyril Ramaphosa, the leader of the ANC since last year, will likely become the new president. Zimbabwe's main opposition leader, the charismatic and pro-democracy activist Morgan Tsvangirai, has died. The 65-year-old had been battling colon cancer. Tsvangirai was a fierce rival of former President Robert Mugabe, who was ousted last November, and he reportedly survived several assassination attempts over the course of his political career. Zimbabwe is expected to hold its first post-Mugabe elections this year, and the opposition will now have to pick a new person to go up against the ruling ZANU-PF party. Secretary of State Rex Tillerson was visiting Jordan today, and he gave remarks saying the Trump administration is committed to seeing a Middle East peace deal, and that they've been working on a plan for months.
I think it'll be up to the president to decide when he feels it's time and he's ready to put that plan forward. I will say it's fairly well advanced, is what I would say.
He didn't offer any details beyond that. But Palestinians have been steadfast that the U.S. can't be part of brokering a peace deal, ever since President Trump declared Jerusalem the capital of Israel late last year. A Veterans Affairs Inspector General report found that VA Secretary David Shulkin misspent taxpayer money on a trip to Europe the government paid for. Last year, Shulkin went to London to attend a summit and to Denmark to meet with healthcare officials. But the report says the $122,000 trip included, quote, significant personal time for sightseeing, and that Shulkin accepted Wimbledon tickets improperly. The Inspector General also found that Shulkin's chief of staff altered an email so that his wife's travel would be covered too. Her plane ticket cost more than $4,000. In a response, Shulkin said the report was inaccurate and, quote, reeks of an agenda. President Trump briefly spoke to reporters in the Oval Office today, offering another bland statement about the Rob Porter scandal, now in its 8th day.
I am totally opposed to domestic violence of any kind. Everyone knows that, and it almost wouldn't even have to be said.
But it did have to be said, because the White House initially praised Porter, and it still hasn't explained what it knew and when. Making the problem worse is the fact that Porter wasn't some low-level staffer. As staff secretary, he was central to everything the White House did, and everything it knew.
A favorite phrase in Washington is the cover-up is worse than the crime. But in the case of Rob Porter, both are pretty damn bad. According to multiple news outlets, White House officials knew 4 months that Porter's ex-wives said he abused them. And not only did they not fire him, they let him continue to serve in a job that routinely handles some of the country's most sensitive documents, even though a security clearance hadn't been finalized. To understand how bad that is, you have to understand what Porter's job was. During the Obama years, Brian McKeon was the chief of staff to the National Security Council, which is the group inside the administration that collates all the advice the president gets on national security and foreign policy. So McKeon's seen a lot of secrets. And the person who had Porter's job, White House staff secretary, saw even more secrets than McKeon did.
In a well-functioning White House, every piece of paper going to the president, and I mean every piece of paper, goes through that office. Porter was the funnel for information and material going to the president. So he has seen some of the most classified documents that are in the United States government.
Here's how it works, according to McKeon. Agencies including the CIA, National Security Council, draft secret documents. Summaries with highly classified intelligence will be printed out for the president. Then those summaries are given to the staff secretary, which was Porter, along with everything else the president might need to read. The staff secretary reads them, gives them to the president, and then takes them when he's done, and then distributes whatever notes the president might have. What's the danger of someone like that having access to classified information?
Well, in his case, he was obviously sensitive to this fact becoming known to other people. When you have this information, what's called derogatory information in your background, that would be embarrassing to you, embarrassing to the president and to the White House, that subjects him to some risk of blackmail.
I mean, that sounds like a spy movie, but you're serious, right?
Sure.
Like
Yeah.
seriously,
That is
like they
the
got
risk.
blackmail.
Yeah, that is the risk.
If Rod Porter beat his wives, he's a monster. But in this case, the FBI doesn't actually care if you're a monster. They care if you're vulnerable to pressure from an enemy of the United States. Something like sitting down with a foreign agent for a chat in exchange for keeping that secret thing in your past a secret. The FBI reportedly raised concerns about Porter, including the allegations of spousal abuse, last year. While we don't know for sure if that's what kept him from getting his clearance, we do know it definitely meets the bar of blackmail risk. And Porter could have been a real target, because the things he saw every day as part of his job are the things that every intelligence agency on Earth desperately wants to get their hands on. Like if you were getting this as a foreign agent, this would be like the good stuff that we have that we don't want you to know about.
It would be some of the crown jewels, certainly. Not only the substance of the secrets, but how we collected those secrets.
Gerrymandering. Redrawing election districts to favor a particular group is as old as the US itself. And it's the reason so many American voting districts look completely bizarre. In the past, judges have struck down gerrymandered maps for discriminating against black voters. But now they've gone a step further, striking down maps because they favor one political party over another. 4 major cases this year focus on extreme partisan gerrymandering. In Pennsylvania, the state Supreme Court ruled in a recent case that the state's congressional map was so biased in favor of Republicans that it violated the state constitution, and ordered the state legislature to submit a new map and have it approved by the state's governor by Thursday. Republicans held 13 seats in Pennsylvania's congressional delegation after the 2016 election, compared to Democrats' 5. But the GOP only got 54% of the vote. They appealed the decision to the U.S. Supreme Court, but the justices declined to intervene. The legislators did come up with a new map after their appeal got shot down, but Pennsylvania's governor rejected it, saying it was, quote, still a gerrymander. That means unless the legislature draws a new map by tomorrow, the state Supreme Court may end up doing it itself. In North Carolina, federal judges tossed out the state's congressional district map, where Republicans hold 10 seats to Democrats' 3. The Supreme Court stepped in and temporarily blocked the decision until it could decide 2 other cases. One of those cases involves Maryland, where Democrats are accused of packing the 6th congressional district to give themselves a safe seat. And the other involves the map for Wisconsin's state assembly. After Republicans won majorities in both houses in Wisconsin in 2010, they created a new map that ensured a lasting legislative majority. In 2016, Republicans won almost 2/3 of the seats in the assembly, but they got just 52% of the vote. This kind of extreme manipulation of the electoral map has become all too common lately, and it's been a winning strategy, especially for Republicans. But it's also forced the courts to consider the constitutionality of partisan gerrymandering, and that could reshape electoral maps across the country.
Every night, Maxim Malashov drives his mobile clinic into the Moscow suburbs. He provides drug users with clean needles and HIV testing. It's a job experts say the government should do.
Так, ну все, поехали. Мы едем в Марьино, это один из районов Москвы. Вот, и так сложилось исторически, что мы уже там стоим, наверное, лет 5. Мы раздаем чистые шприцы, презервативы, делаем тесты на ВИЧ.
Maxime is at the forefront of Russia's fight against the spread of HIV.
Здорово, здорово, да.
It has one of the highest rates of new infections of any country in the world.
А у тебя что со статусом? Положительный, отрицательный?
Вот об этом я узнал о ВИЧе, вот еще инфицированно узнал.
А где ты сдавал, если не секрет?
В местах, район.
А, в лагере, да, брали? Ясно.
The Russian government has come under pressure for acting too slowly, but it says that since it developed a national strategy for HIV in 2015, treatment procedures have improved, and more than 32 million people have been tested each year.
Нет оснований объявлять и называть это эпидемией. Да, у нас сейчас достаточное количество случаев ВИЧ, но это накопительные случаи, мы с этим бременем еще будем жить долго.
Russia saw a 10% increase in new diagnoses every year from 2006 to 2015. Since then, the health ministry says their data shows a slight decline in the number of new cases.
Эти случаи в 2015 году были представлены как 110 тысяч, то в 2016 это было 85 тысяч. И такую же тенденцию к снижению мы видим и по предварительным данным 2017 года. Поэтому говорить о ситуации, что в России не принимаются меры и что ситуация ухудшается, в принципе нельзя. Она на сегодняшний день полностью под контролем.
But the state's own Federal AIDS Center, a research institute, says the health ministry underestimates new cases, counting only those who interact with government services.
Почти 1% взрослого населения в России живет с вирусом иммунодефицита, что как раз является пограничным показателем перехода между концентрированной и генерализованной эпидемией. Но мы находимся как раз в стадии, когда ВИЧ переходит от групп повышенного риска заражения в общее население.
Dr. Pokrovsky says at least 1.2 million people have been infected with HIV in Russia, and that even that figure is likely much higher. Out of this total, 280,000 people have died. Of the more than 800,000 people living with the virus, the health ministry is treating only 350,000. And of the tens of thousands of new cases each year, 50% come from sexual intercourse, and 45 to 48% result from drug use.
Совершенно очевидно, что число новых случаев растет не только потому, что больше обследуют на ВИЧ-инфекцию, но и потому, что профилактических мероприятий недостаточно. Раздача чистых шприцев и обучение этих наркоманов – это очень эффективный путь снижения передачи ВИЧ в этой группе. Поэтому сейчас, к сожалению, в России этим занимаются в основном неправительственные организации.
Maxime's work survives on donations, mostly from overseas. As a result, the government listed his organization as a foreign agent. The legal headaches and struggle for funding have made the delivery of testing and treatment services even harder.
Ну, нет какой-то воли посмотреть правде в глаза. У чиновников, кто занимается общественным здравоохранением, это даже, наверное, первое. Вот, и самое основное. Вот, и вместо того, чтобы заниматься какими-то там рапортами от того, что там, ну, как бы все не так плохо, вот мы тоже много что делаем, но признай, что, блин, ну все плохо, прям реально.
This past fall, Laura Moriarty's new novel, American Heart, went out for its first round of reviews. The book tells the story of Sarah Mary, a white Midwestern teen who helps a Muslim woman escape from a dystopian America where Muslims have been placed into internment camps. It's like Huck Finn for the Trump era. Moriarty is white and a professor at Kansas University, where she teaches about issues of representation and ownership of stories. So she knew she had to tread carefully. Knowing that there will most likely be some backlash, what do you do to prepare yourself for writing this book?
I read as much as I could from the perspective of Muslim Americans and Iranian Americans. I also thought about complaints I had read about how white people have sometimes depicted people of color in the past, and I consciously tried to write against those tropes.
At first, it seemed like Laura's caution had paid off. Kirkus, one of the most influential advanced review houses in America, assigned American Heart to a Muslim American woman. She rewarded the book with a coveted star, which lined American Heart up for better sales, more press, and publicity. But after some critics began to object online, Kirkus pulled its star and had the reviewer revise her take. In a statement, Kirkus said, quote, "Some of the wording fell short of meeting our standards for clarity and sensitivity."
I saw online that, this message from Kirkus, and it started out saying, we understand that people are upset about it, so we are going to reconsider her review and make it more sensitive. And my jaw dropped.
Online controversies happen all the time, but Kirkus's decision to pull Moriarty's star signaled a new capitulation. We asked Kirkus's editor-in-chief, Claiborne Smith, for comment on their editorial process, but he refused repeated requests for an interview for this piece.
Here you have a professional reviewer, a thoughtful reviewer who had read the book in its entirety, who was a YA specialist, who was well-versed in white savior narratives, according to Kirkus, and then who also was a woman of color and a Muslim. They censored her words, her independent reading of a book. And to me, that was just so crazy because, people can think what they want about a book. People can criticize my book. That's fine. That's normal. I'm used to that. That's okay. But here you had a case where someone was not allowed to like the book.
Do you think that we're going to sort of enter a publishing world in which, people's experiences are sort of tethered to the actual way in which they write?
I think it's already happening. I think it's already happened. And I think with Kirkus, that was just like the death blow. I know that people who are trying to write outside of their experience, their personal experience, even if the books are good, publishers are shied away. And of course they would be after this. They see what's happening.
American Heart was officially published on January 30th of this year. So far, it's sold far fewer copies than expected, something that Moriarty attributes to the difficulties of promoting a book that has been deemed problematic. Giselle Anatole was one of Laura's sensitivity readers for American Heart. She's a fellow professor at Kansas University who specifically studies representation in children's books. When you're reading through it, were there any parts that sort of gave you pause or, something that you flagged that you would want to talk to Laura about?
I was worried that it could be yet another instance of the white savior narrative. Laura was very careful about showing a very interesting balance between these two characters. The one thing that Sarah Mary has that Sadaf doesn't have is white privilege. And so I think the book is a really interesting way of making people kind of aware of their white privilege.
Giselle didn't think American Heart was perfect, but she did see a parallel between it and another classic of young adult fiction.
In 1974, Paula Fox published The Slave Dancer, which won the Newbery. The protagonist is a young white boy who's kidnapped, and he's a musician, so he plays the flute aboard a slave ship. In being published, it allowed people to say, there are lots of writers who could maybe tackle this subject in more nuanced ways, in some different perspectives. And so then a couple of years later, then we get the first Newbery to an African-American writer. And then a couple of years after that, then there's Roll of Thunder, Hear My Cry, which is now this classic.
Do you think to convince white Americans who have Islamophobic thoughts that perhaps they might be wrong, do you think that they need to hear those arguments from another white person?
With this book, I believe I'm using my cultural accessibility. I'm familiar with Sarah Mary's world. I'm familiar with how she talks and how she thinks and where she lives and where she grew up. And I feel like I can write in a way that's familiar to her and someone coming from her position to tease out the irrationality of those beliefs.
Şu anda burada Selçuk Efes Deve Göçleri Festivalimizin 1. günü olan Cumartesi gününde 1000 yıl belki de bizim geçmişe günümüze gidildiğinde devecilik var yani. Görkemli bir kortej yürüyüşümüz olacak. Bizde de şöyle bir aslında söz var, gelinlik kız gibi. Bunun aslında devenin sevgisini.
Seyirciler, baş güreşlerinde ikisi de son derece dikkatli güreşlerini paylaşıyorlar şu ana kadar.
Develerimizin kızgınlığı çiftleşme döneminden kaynaklanan bir aslında olgu. Yani dövünmeye başlar, dövünmeyle beraber dişlerini öttürür, gıcır gıcır ses getirir dişlerinden, köpürmeye başlar. Sürü hayvanları olduğu için develer aslında sürüde çiftleşmeyi kazanmak için, hak etmek için birbirlerine saldırırlar. Tamamen develer boyunlarıyla, işte kollarıyla yani ön ayaklarıyla, başlarıyla, bacaklarıyla güreşiyorlar. Genel anlamda güreşlerimizde kazananı belirlemenin 3 tane noktası var. Kaçmak, bağırmak, yıkılmak, havut yere değecek. Yani hani çöker kakar bazen böyle, onu saymıyoruz. Yıkılmak tam olacak. Başka yerlerde de yapılıyor deve güreşleri. Çeşitli ilçelerde de yapılıyor. Ama Selçuk'un yeri, havası deveciler üzerinde apayrıdır.
Develerle ilişkim 7 yaşında başladı. O dönemden beri develerle içli dışlı onlara tutku haline geldi. Devemiz, Baybars'ımız bizim, canımız ciğerimiz. Evimizin oğlu. Büyüttük, yetiştirdik. Bu sökeli, bunu 2 sene önce aldım. Kazandığın zaman tabii çok mutlu bir şekilde gururlu dönüyorsun. Ve bir hafta o mutluluk devam ediyor. Ama kaybettiğin zaman o bir ömür boyu sürüyor. Gelen deve sayısı burada 145. Hepimiz çok heyecanlıyız. Kalbim yerinden çıkacak gibi. Meteor devesiyle görüşeceğiz. O biraz daha ağır bizden. Allah yardımcımız olsun.
Bu aracın üzerine deve çıkmıştır, acil durum. Yerli güreş severler başaltı güreşlerinde faytoncu Sökeli. Diğer yanda Sarayköy'den Meteor. Soldan teke inmeye çalışan Edremit'ten faytoncu. Ana rengi biraz daha siyah olan, soldan gelen tekleri bağlamaya çalışan Sarayköy'den Meteor. Ayırın. Ayırın. Meteor galiptir.
Rakibinden kaçtı. Ağır geldi rakibi. Üzgün ayrılıyorum. Develerinle ilgili hayalim her güreşte kazanması. İşte dediğim gibi önümüzdeki hafta bu heyecan tekrar başa dönüyor. Devam ediyor yine. Tamamen biz develerle yatıp develerle kalkıyoruz.
That's Vice News Tonight for Wednesday, February 14th.